It started with a knock on the door, a knock that shattered my world and I now realize set the stage for one of the most unbelievable betrayals a person could ever face. My father-in-law, a man I genuinely loved and respected, had passed away. A sudden heart attack, they said. He was only 68, vibrant, full of life, and the bedrock of our family. But what happened next, at the reading of his will, was something straight out of a movie, a horror film designed to rip your heart out and leave you for dead. My husband, the man I had built a life with for 15 years, the father of my children, abandoned me right there, in front of everyone, after he inherited $85 million. $85 million. Can you even imagine? Was I wrong to think that after all those years, all the struggles, all the love, that money wouldn't change him? Tell me, if you would have done the same thing, would you have seen this coming? Let me take you back to the beginning, before the money, before the betrayal, before my life became a testament to how quickly people can change when immense wealth dangles before them. I met Mark when we were both in our early 20s, fresh out of college, ambitious but broke. He was charming, witty, and had a smile that could light up a room. I was instantly smitten. We worked hard, side by side, building our careers from the ground up. He was an aspiring architect, and I was a budding graphic designer. We shared a tiny apartment, ate ramen noodles more often than not, and dreamed of a future where we wouldn't have to count every penny. His family wasn't wealthy then. His father, Mr. Henderson, was a successful, but not obscenely rich, real estate developer. He was comfortable, very comfortable, but nothing that would suggest the fortune that would later emerge. Mark's mother had passed away when he was young, and it was just him and his father for a long time before Mr. Henderson remarried a lovely woman named Susan, who became like a second mother to Mark, and later, to me. Our wedding was simple, beautiful, and filled with love. We promised to stand by each other through thick and thin, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. We meant every word. For the first 10 years of our marriage, we were for poorer. We struggled to make ends meet, especially after our 2 children, Lily and Tom, were born. Mark's architectural firm was slowly gaining traction, and my freelance design business was growing, but it was a constant juggle. Mr. Henderson was always supportive, offering advice and occasionally a small loan to help us through a tight spot, always with the understanding that we would pay him back, which we always did. He taught us the value of hard work and integrity. He admired our drive and our commitment to each other and our children. He often told Mark how proud he was of the man he had become, how he built his own success rather than relying on handouts. About 5 years before his passing, Mr. Henderson made a massive, strategic investment that transformed his already substantial wealth into something truly extraordinary. He bought vast tracts of undeveloped land on the outskirts of the city, land that was then considered undesirable. Everyone thought he was crazy. But Mr. Henderson, with his keen foresight, knew something others didn't. Within a couple of years, the city announced a major expansion plan, including new infrastructure and a huge tech park, right where his land was located. Suddenly, his undesirable land was prime real estate, its value skyrocketing beyond anyone's wildest dreams. That's when the whispers started, the hushed conversations about how Mr. Henderson was now a multimillionaire, perhaps even approaching billionaire status. He remained humble, though, still driving his modest car, still living in the same house, though he did splurge on a beautiful vacation home by the coast, which became a favorite family getaway. Life didn't change for us immediately, not outwardly. Mark continued to work tirelessly, and I kept busy with my design projects and raising our children. We knew Mr. Henderson was incredibly wealthy, but it felt abstract, distant. We didn't live lavishly, still pinching pennies where we could, still planning family vacations that were fun but budget-friendly. Mark would occasionally joke about his inheritance, saying things like, "One day, we'll be rich, honey, and I'll buy you a castle." I'd laugh, never taking it seriously, always believing that our love and our family were our greatest treasures, far more valuable than any sum of money. We were a team, a partnership. We faced everything together, celebrated every small victory, and comforted each other through every setback. That was our foundation. Or so I thought. Then came the phone call, the one that changed everything. Mark received it late one evening. He was on the phone for what felt like an eternity, his face paling with every word. When he finally hung up, he turned to me, his eyes wide with unshed tears. "My father, he's gone," he choked out, the words catching in his throat. I rushed to him, holding him as he sobbed. It was a devastating loss for all of us. Mr. Henderson was a truly good man, a generous spirit, and his presence left a gaping hole in our lives. The funeral was a blur of tears, condolences, and the somber realization that a giant in our family was no more. Susan, his wife, was heartbroken but strong, a pillar of grace in her grief. A few weeks later, the lawyer called. It was time for the reading of the will. The atmosphere in the lawyer's office was heavy, thick with sorrow and a strange undercurrent of anticipation. There was Susan, Mark, his half-sister Sarah, from Mr. Henderson's previous marriage before Mark's mother, and a few other close family members. I was there, of course, as Mark's wife, his partner. I sat beside him, holding his hand, offering silent support. The lawyer, a stern-looking man with a precise manner, began to read. He spoke of Mr. Henderson's life, his achievements, his philanthropic endeavors. Then he got to the allocations. To Susan, his beloved wife, a substantial trust fund, the coastal vacation home, and several properties. To Sarah, a generous sum and a smaller trust. And then he got to Mark. He cleared his throat. To my son, Mark, in recognition of his unwavering dedication, his hard work, and his commitment to building his own success, I bequeath the majority of my estate, including all remaining real estate holdings, investments, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $85 million. $85 million. The number hung in the air, a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. A collective gasp rippled through the room. My own heart leaped into my throat. I squeezed Mark's hand, a joyful, incredulous squeeze, looking at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, expecting him to share the same look of utter disbelief and elation. This was it, our dreams finally realized. All those years of struggle gone. Our children's future secured. A weight lifted, a future brimming with possibilities. I imagined us discussing plans, investing wisely, perhaps starting a foundation in his father's name. We could finally breathe. But Mark didn't meet my gaze. His hand, which had been clutching mine tightly just moments before, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to withdraw. His face, which had been pale with grief and then surprise, hardened into an unfamiliar mask. He stared straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the lawyer, a strange, calculating glint in them that I had never seen before. A cold dread began to creep into my stomach. This wasn't the Mark I knew, the Mark who would have squeezed my hand back, who would have whispered, "We did it, honey," or "This is for our family." This was someone else. The lawyer continued, oblivious to the shift in the room's emotional temperature. He detailed the specifics of the inheritance, the various accounts, the properties. Mark listened intently, not missing a single word. When the reading was finally over, and the lawyer closed the file, signaling the end, everyone started to stir, offering condolences to Mark and congratulations, albeit with a hint of envy in some of the voices. I leaned in, ready to embrace Mark, to share this monumental moment with him. But before I could, he stood up, pulled his hand completely free from mine, and turned to face the room. He cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice strangely flat, devoid of emotion. Everyone looked at him, surprised. Susan looked concerned. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. What was he going to say? A grand gesture? A tribute to his father? "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," he continued, his eyes sweeping over the faces, deliberately avoiding mine. "And I've come to a decision. This inheritance, it changes things. It changes everything." He paused, and in that moment, the air grew thick with unspoken tension. My blood ran cold. I knew, somehow, deep in my gut, what was coming. It was a horrifying, Sickening realization. I've decided that I need to be free, he announced, his voice now gaining a chillingly resolute tone. Free to pursue my own path, without any anchors holding me back. He took a deep breath, and then he dropped the bomb. Therefore, I am filing for divorce from my wife, Sarah. I want it to be clear, effective immediately. I also want to make it unequivocally clear that she is not entitled to any portion of this inheritance. This money is solely mine, inherited directly from my father, and is not marital property. The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched, long and agonizing, filled with the collective shock of everyone present. I felt the color drain from my face, my vision blurring at the edges. My body went numb. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't even move. It was as if a physical blow had landed, knocking the wind out of me, shattering every illusion I had ever held. Mark stood there, impassive, looking at me with eyes that held no recognition, no love, no remorse. He was a stranger. My husband, the man I loved, the father of my children, had just discarded me like an old shoe, right after inheriting $85 million. The cruel irony, the sheer audacity of it, was a bitter taste in my mouth. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, a lifetime of shared dreams, and in one cold, calculating moment, my husband, the man who had pledged his life to me, had decided I was an anchor, now that he had $85 million. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have crumbled? Fought back? How would you have reacted to such an unthinkable betrayal? I remember the lawyer finally breaking the silence, his voice a bewildered stammer. Mr. Henderson, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. Are you certain you wish to proceed with this announcement in this setting? Mark simply nodded, his gaze still fixed and unyielding. Susan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief as she looked from Mark to me. Sarah, his half-sister, looked equally stunned, though a flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. The rest of the room was a tableau of open mouths and horrified expressions. I finally found my voice, a weak, trembling whisper that barely escaped my lips. Mark, what are you saying? Is this a joke? Please tell me this is a joke. My plea was met with his cold, blank stare. It's not a joke, Sarah. I'm serious. I want a divorce. And I want you to understand, clearly, that this inheritance is separate. It's not part of the marital estate. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, with such clinical detachment, as if discussing a business transaction, not tearing apart a family. The betrayal was a physical ache, a searing pain in my chest. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I stood up, my legs wobbly beneath me, and slowly walked out of the office, the stunned silence of the room following me. I didn't cry then. I was in too much shock. It felt like I was watching a scene from a movie, detached from my own reality. The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations, tears, and overwhelming despair. Mark, true to his word, immediately filed for divorce. His lawyers, a formidable team he had hired with his new wealth, were ruthless. They argued vehemently that the inheritance was separate property, acquired after the marriage, but before the finalization of the divorce, and therefore, I had no claim to it. My own lawyer, a kind but somewhat overwhelmed family attorney, assured me we had a strong case, especially regarding spousal support and child support, and potentially a portion of the marital assets that existed before the inheritance. But the idea of fighting Mark, of dragging our family through a bitter legal battle, was crushing. During this time, Mark moved out of our home. He bought himself a lavish penthouse apartment in the city, a place he had once dreamed about, a place I had helped him design in countless late-night conversations. He started driving a ridiculously expensive sports car. He was suddenly living a life of unimaginable luxury, while I was left picking up the pieces of our shattered existence, trying to explain to our confused and heartbroken children why their father had suddenly disappeared and why he was acting like a stranger. He rarely visited the kids, and when he did, He was distant, preoccupied. He didn't even look at me. It was as if I no longer existed in his world, replaced by the glittering allure of $85 million. My anger slowly started to replace my sorrow. How could he? How could the man who promised to love me forever, the man who cried with me, laughed with me, built a life with me, just discard me so easily? It wasn't just about the money. It was about the utter disrespect, the callous disregard for our 15 years together, for our children. He had sacrificed our family, our love, for pure greed. And that's when a quiet, burning resolve settled within me. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not entirely. I remembered something Mr. Henderson had told me once, during a quiet conversation when Mark was out of the room. He had been talking about Mark's previous girlfriend, a woman who had been very materialistic and whom Mr. Henderson clearly disliked. He had looked at me, a twinkle in his eye, and said, "Sarah, you're a good woman. You're smart and you have integrity. You're not like some of the others who were only after Mark's potential inheritance. Mark needs someone grounded, someone who values character over cash." He had paused, then added, "And I've made sure to protect my assets and my children from anyone who might be tempted to exploit them, or them to exploit others, should they ever become incredibly wealthy. My will has certain provisions to ensure true intentions are revealed and true families are cared for." At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, assuming it was just general wise counsel. But now, those words echoed in my mind. I called my lawyer again, excited. "I think there's something in Mr. Henderson's will," I told her, relaying the conversation. He hinted at provisions to protect his children and family from exploitation and to reveal true intentions. My lawyer, intrigued, started digging deeper. She requested every amendment, every codicil, every obscure clause in Mr. Henderson's extensive will. It took weeks, but eventually she found it. A highly unusual, carefully worded clause, tucked away near the end, that applied specifically to his primary heir, Mark. It stated, in essence, that should Mark inherit a significant portion of the estate, defined as over $50 million, and within 1 year of the inheritance, initiate divorce proceedings against his current spouse, he would forfeit 75% of his inherited liquid assets, which would then be divided equally among his legal spouse at the time of the inheritance and his legitimate children. The clause was designed, according to a separate letter of intent found with the will, to ensure Mark valued his family over sudden wealth and to protect his family from being discarded for mercenary reasons. Mr. Henderson, with his shrewd business mind, had anticipated the possibility of such a betrayal. He had laid a trap, a contingency plan for a son he knew could be swayed by greed, hoping to encourage him to choose family, but also ensuring his true family would be cared for if he failed. The remaining 25% of Mark's inheritance, primarily real estate holdings he couldn't easily liquidate, would be placed in a trust, the income from which would go to Mark, but the principal would eventually pass to his children. My lawyer was ecstatic. "Sarah, this changes everything. This clause is ironclad." Armed with this information, we went back to court. Mark's lawyers, who had been so arrogant and dismissive, were completely blindsided. The judge, after reviewing the clause and the accompanying letter of intent, ruled decisively in our favor. Mark's face, when the verdict was read, was a mask of pure fury and shock. He had lost. He had tried to discard me and our children for the sake of money, only to have that very money taken away from him, given to the people he had tried to abandon. The 75% of the liquid assets, a staggering $63.75 million, was split between me and our 2 children. Each of us received over $21 million. Mark was left with 25% of the real estate holdings, tied up in a trust, and the income from it, which was still substantial, but a far cry from the $85 million he had so greedily grasped for. The aftermath was bittersweet. I had secured our children's future and my own, far beyond anything I could have ever dreamed of. But the cost was immense. My marriage was irrevocably broken, and my heart was shattered. Mark, defeated and humiliated, retreated from our lives even further. He saw the children occasionally, but the bond was broken. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a ghost of greed. Susan was incredibly supportive, offering me comfort and validating my pain. She expressed her profound disappointment in Mark, saying it was never what his father would have wanted. Sarah, Mark's half-sister, also reached out, apologizing for her brother's behavior and offering her support. I used my portion of the inheritance wisely. I invested it, ensuring a secure future for myself and for Lily and Tom. We moved into a beautiful new home, a place filled with peace and healing, far away from the painful memories. I focused on rebuilding my life, on raising my children with love and stability, and on finding joy in simple things again. It was a long, arduous journey, but I emerged stronger, wiser, and ultimately free from a man who had shown his true colors in the most devastating way possible. So, that's my story. A tale of love, betrayal, and the unexpected twists of a will that served as both a curse and a blessing. It taught me that money truly can change people, sometimes for the worse, but also that justice, in its own unexpected way, can prevail. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in integrity, love, and the strength of the bonds you share. Like this video if you were on my side, and if you believe in karmic justice. Subscribe for more stories like this, where truth is stranger than fiction, and betrayals lurk around every corner. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. What do you think of Mr. Henderson's brilliant foresight? Was Mark's punishment fair? I'll see you all in the next story.